My pleasure, Ann. Well, hello, everybody. I am a Wayne State Warrior myself in my probably my senior year in psychology. So this is a treat to kind of get back and be a part of teaching this class for other Warriors. My name is again Trevor. I've been here at Two James for about 2.5 years. I started as a barback and I've worked my way up to bartending or mixologing, I guess, and watched the brand grow from basically just this shop to now we have a Grand Rapids location as well as the brand new restaurant across the street at Michigan Avenue that's just been getting crazy reviews called Super Guile. So if you are in town or you want a bite to eat, definitely recommend checking that out. Two James is the oldest distillery in Detroit since Prohibition. We're the first to open in Detroit since Prohibition, rather. We're going on about 9 years now. I know that intro makes us sound a lot older, but the craft movement for spirits is kind of a newer trend. We were ahead of that trend a little bit more than a lot of these brands. When we opened our doors, we started with gin and vodka because you can make gin and vodka within just a few days. Versus whiskey takes several years for the complexity and just the wonderful flavors of whiskey that imparted in the aging process comes from just sitting in a barrel for years. So it took us a while to develop those products. We opened initially with just vodka, gin, and then absinthe, and built the brand from there. And now we have six aged whiskeys, 3 more that are going to be coming out soon. Several products that are going to be coming out soon, such as a wheated bourbon, which has been a crazy popular trend in the world of bourbon lately. But I'm going to start with the introduction of the owner. He's not here right now, but his name is Dave Landrum. He was from Michigan. He's from Dearborn, actually, so he's a local. He went to Michigan State with pursued an arts degree. So the labeling and the branding and the design of the labels and the products themselves, he's had a lot of his hand in, especially the Catcher's Rye whiskey label. His favorite book was Catcher in the Rye, so that's he took pride in designing the label himself. But he found a pursuit in the wine industry actually, and started working at a cafe in Ann Arbor, which then the name of the place escapes me. But he fell in love with wine and decided to pursue after he graduated from Michigan State. Went to become a sommelier, and he actually achieved a level 2 sommelier in that journey. Didn't go quite all the way, but ended up finding his way to the craft spirits industry. And again, when Two James started, there were about 12 or 1,300 distilleries in the country. And that includes, all the big boys like Jim Beam, Brown-Forman, Old Forester, stuff like that, as well as some of the smaller ones. And now there are over 14,000. So we were kind of ahead of that curve. Dave Landrum definitely saw the opportunity there. Originally wanted to start the business in California, but was brought back to Detroit and started the business here with a man named Dave Pickerell. We like to refer to him as the Johnny Appleseed of bourbon. He was the head distiller of Maker's Mark, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. If you're into the world of whiskey, it's a wheated whiskey bourbon. And when he was done at Maker's Mark and put in his several decades, he wanted to teach others how to make really great whiskey, really great spirits. So Dave Pickerell from Maker's Mark was kind of important in teaching our distillers the tasks and the recipes that we use still today. Obviously, we don't follow Maker's Mark recipe. We do our own thing for sure, but Dave Pickerell was a big part of that. I'm going to take you through the process of how the juice is actually made here in a minute. But that's the history of Two James. Again, we've opened another location in Grand Rapids last year, which was a terrible time to open a business. But you know what? It's gone well, and it's been very well received. It's inside of Seven Monks Tap Room. If you guys ever make it out there, definitely go check it out. And of course, we have the new restaurant featuring all of our spirits as well. So without further ado, I'm going to take you through the process of how we make our booze. So behind me, which you probably have been peeking at, this giant copper still is kind of one of the most important parts of this. But before we get to the still, excuse me, I'm going to switch my camera. We take hundreds and hundreds of pounds of grain, and they go into these gigantic tanks, fermentation tanks. I don't know the actual volume on these, but for instance, this one here, this is a wheated bourbon. So basically a wheated bourbon is a bourbon that is made, all bourbon, I should say, is at least 51% corn. The rest of the mash bill is usually mixed up with rye and barley and other cereal grains. Some distilleries and very popular distilleries as of late, such as Weller, Maker's Mark, instead of rye, they use wheat. So a wheated bourbon is using wheat instead of rye. It ends up with a much sweeter product. But when it's in this process, we soak the grain, and then we enter in the process of an enzyme that creates the actual sugar alcohols. And basically what the yeast does when it's in this process is it eats the carbohydrates that are in the grains, and it excretes CO2 and alcohol and sugar alcohol. So when that process is done, and that takes about a couple of days, we pump it out into this thing. Excuse me, scoot down a little bit. And we kind of purify it a little bit, and then it goes into the mash, the copper still, excuse me. So I'm trying to get my placement here. And the purification of the alcohol continues. When alcohol is made, there's a lot of byproducts there's a lot of forms of alcohol rather that are made in the process of making alcohol. And this is where the purification of the alcohol begins. And this little thing on the side is also made in that. But basically, the alcohol is distilled with steam. And so just like a bottle of water, when you take a cold bottle of water into a hot room, the water condensates. Well, the alcohol does the same thing, and it does that in this process. And then when that happens, you have the pure alcohol form pumped into the receiving tank. And then from there, let's flip my camera around. From there, depending on what product that you're distilling, whether it's gin, whiskey, vodka, whatever, either it's ready to bottle after that. Whiskey, gin usually is immediately ready to bottle. But if you're making whiskey, it goes into a barrel. So the barrels, we have some special products along here, and I'm gonna highlight some of these here for you. But there's you might notice the Detroit Tigers D. We got some special products back here for local teams and stuff, and we're gonna crack that bottle when the Tigers eventually win the World Series. So that could be a very, very old whiskey. We'll see. And then over to the left with all the kids' hand paints. That is Dave's kids' hands. They're gonna crack those when his kids are of age. So that's gonna be a really special whiskey. And of course, the rest of these barrels are other special projects. Our biggest rick house where we age our whiskeys is in Ann Arbor, Dexter rather, at Wing Farms. Wing Farms produces all of our grain. They make all of our corn and our rye for our rye whiskeys and our bourbons. So we have a really great relationship with them. We do big events out there, and it's a beautiful event space. They've got their own little bar situation there as well. If you end up visiting Ann Arbor and want to see where the magic is made, I suppose, definitely check out them, Wing Farms. Without further ado, I'm going to step back behind my bar and start walking you through the process of making cocktails. Can everybody hear me okay? Good? Okay. So we have quite a few products here. I'm going to walk you through our whiskeys. We have our J. Riddle peated bourbon, which contains the only product, the only grain rather, that we don't make ourselves. If you're familiar with the world of Scotch, Scotch can only be made in Scotland, right? Just like champagne can only be made in Champagne, France. Bourbon can only be made in America, etc. So we import peated barley from England, from Scotland almost. And that's the only product, the only grain that we don't produce or grow here in Michigan that goes into one of our products. But this is our peated bourbon, J. Riddle. There's a lot of trivia here if you know Jimmy Hoffa at all. Jimmy Hoffa's middle name was Riddle, so we named this after him. It's James Riddle Hoffa, J. Riddle. The last place he was ever seen was the Red Fox Tavern. And of course, his Teamsters Union was the local 299, and their logo was the upside down horseshoe. So this is a smoky whiskey, a very sweet underneath the peat notes. You get a very sweet whiskey with a lot of butterscotch and like buttered popcorn notes. A nice entry to the smokier whiskeys because it's a sweeter bourbon. And then next to that, in the smoky category, this is my favorite spirit that we make for cocktails, actually. This is Johnny Smoking Gun. So this is a corn and rye, mostly rye whiskey, proofed up to 120, and then infused with 3 different kinds of tea. So this has a lot of umami flavors, and it has a lot of herbal flavors. They get a lot of vanilla and jasmine notes from this, but we made this in partnership with Johnny Noodle King. If you're familiar with the ramen shop here in Detroit, we made this in partnership with them to go with their pork and fish broth, the umami flavors of their ramen. So they carry that there, and we also distribute this statewide. So, and it's about 87 proof, so it's a little lighter on the proof for in comparison to most of our whiskeys. Next, we've got our Grass Widow bourbon. This is kind of our flagship bourbon. This is produced for us by a company called MGP, Midwest Grain Products, grown in the same riverbed as where all of the most famous bourbons in the world come from, except this is from Indiana and not Kentucky. But this is a product that we sourced ourselves through them and select the barrels and select the flavor profile that we want with them. And then we take it and then bring it back to Detroit and finish it in a wine cask. So it gives it it's a high rye bourbon, but the wine finish gives it a really smooth, sweet finish. This is what we use for like an old fashioned generally. About 91 proof. It's a heavy hitter for sure, but the wine finish process makes it very smooth and approachable. And of course, featured today in your cocktails, we have our Catcher's Rye whiskey. This is 100% Michigan grown rye. This is grown outside of Ann Arbor at Wing Farms. And for being a straight rye, it is very approachable, very sweet. And usually rye is known for being very spicy, having an intense punch. And when you get a rye whiskey like a Woodford or something, it's a blend of other grains that are in there to kind of soften the blow, as they say. But there's not a whole lot of straight ryes like that, on the market. So this has been very popular for us, and rye whiskey has been a recent trend over the last 2 years. So we were kind of ahead of the curve with this one. We won a double gold in the World Spirits competition in San Francisco in 2016 for this product. So it's about 99 or 98.9 proof. One of the heavier whiskeys that we make, but very sweet, very smooth, very balanced. I honestly would put it up against a lot of Kentucky bourbons for sweetness and smoothness and complexity, even though it's just a single grain and not corn, nothing else in the mash to sweeten it. And then we have that exact same juice, that straight rye, but this just never touches a barrel. So it is completely clear, completely white, white whiskey. So we call it that because it's just untouched by the barrel. This has got some floral notes. It's kind of impressive to see, like, just comparing the two. The only difference is this bottle these bottles sit in barrels for 3.5 to 4 years. So exact same juice, but very different intense color difference in the two products, as you can see. And the barrels where all the complexity comes from. So this is a product that has a kind of a niche following, but and it's won out some awards as well, but just not something that people generally order too much. And then getting into the botanical spirits, we've got our Old Cockney gin. This is the London style gin, named after a neighborhood in London. This is not too piney, not too elderflowery, not too coriandery, not too intensely herbal, not too sharp either. Really nice balanced gin. I honestly never liked gin before I started working here, and then I tasted better quality gin because when I started, when I was in college, we drank Bombay Sapphire, and I thought that was like what all gin tasted like, and that was a big no for me. So I thought I was no for gin for the rest of my life. And then I started to taste better quality gin, and I'm like, wow, this is it's a world of flavor that's very different from whiskey that has always been my favorite, and bourbon, but very fresh, wonderful mouthfeel. And again, these are all made from Michigan grown ingredients. You take that same gin. This is the gin, again, finished in whiskey barrels, in bourbon barrels. It's rather technically rested. It's not a full aging process in whiskey, but it's a barrel rested or barrel aged gin for about 3 to 4 months. So not too intensely heavy on the caramely intense notes of whiskey, but mellows out and kind of marries the complexity of whiskey with the herbal freshness of gin. So this is kind of a whiskey drinker's gin. Kind of a fun one to play around with, use in place of bourbon in an old fashioned, or in a Negroni or almost a Boulevardier, instead of just straight gin. So that's a fun one for us. Behind the bar, we got our Nain Rouge Absinthe. This is a pretty solid product. This is made with 32 different botanicals, and it's about 120 proof. People come in all the time and ask, wait, I thought absinthe was illegal. I thought it made you trip. I thought, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that is the most misunderstood spirit in the world, in my opinion. It does not make you trip. The main product in it, one of the main ingredients rather, is called wormwood. And it was illegal until 2007 to distill spirits with wormwood. So because of this, absinthe has this notoriety around, at least in America. And since Prohibition, the production of absinthe and wormwood-based spirits was outlawed because there is a way to extract a compound and alcohol out of wormwood that can have some psychoactive effects, but you would have to drink a case of absinthe for any of that to even try to take effect, and by that you would probably be dead from alcohol poisoning. So, again, a totally misunderstood spirit, but this is made of 32 different botanicals. Very, I would say black licorice taste is what I would kind of liken it to. We also infuse peppermint into it to kind of round out that taste, but it's a very intense flavor. So it's a hard one to make cocktails with. And usually when people drink it, it's just infused with water, a sugar cube, and a mint leaf just to even out those flavors. And it's also, again, 120 proof. So you need some water and just a little extra to help separate those 32 botanicals. And of course, we have our 28 Islands vodka. This is a vodka made with Michigan, hi John, Michigan grown winter wheat and winter wheat berry. So this is a vodka that kind of subverts the idea of vodka. Most vodka makers make the product to have the absence of flavor rather than having it taste like anything. We went the opposite direction. We wanted it to taste like something. So this has a really wonderful mouthfeel. Again, it's based off of a wheat, so it's a sweeter whiskey, or excuse me, it's a sweeter vodka. And it's a really surprising product for people that are used to like Smirnoff or something. And again, this is 28 Islands vodka. So this is named after the 28 islands that are between Detroit and Canada. And those were the 28 islands during Prohibition that the bootleggers would move their booze in and out of the country. And Detroit was just absolutely enormous in influence at that period of time. Such an enormous amount of liquor and different forms of alcohol came through Detroit, through Canada at the time. So during Prohibition, Detroit was just such a big deal that actually recently when they were, we were actually right behind the train station, the Detroit train station. So when they were in the renovation process, they peeled back some wallpaper and found hundreds of bottles of whiskey from that era that were just stashed there and somehow forgotten about. But yeah, so just to show you, like Detroit was such a big deal at the time of Prohibition for getting alcohol and booze in a time when alcohol was outlawed here in America, sadly. And last but not least, we have our Jamaican rum. So this is a rum that is made, this is a blend of 3 different Jamaican rums. So the rum is made for us in Jamaica. It's in this different bottle. The only 2 products that are not made completely by us are in these kind of short fat bottles. Everything else in these tall bottles is made right here in Detroit behind me. But the rum is a blend of 3 different Jamaican rums. One's a 6-year, one is a 2-year, and an unaged rum. And then we ship it up here, we blend it to our liking, and we finish it in a wine cask. So super funky rum. It's not a spiced rum. It's not a clear rum. It's a lot of butterscotchy notes, really funky nose. And it's been so popular for us. This has been one of the most fun projects for us in the tiki world. It's just absolutely blown up with the tiki industry and tiki bar world. So like bars like Smuggler's Cove, False Idol in San Diego, Lost River here in Detroit. So they all have their own kind of finishes of Dr. Bird. They get their own versions of Dr. Bird for their bars. So it's cool to have our place on some of the most important bars in the world for tiki, at least. So without further ado, I'm going to step into the process of making the cocktails that come into your kits. Also going to hydrate a little bit because it is a hot one. So I'm going to start with the old fashioned. So as its name implies, the old fashioned is one of the oldest cocktails in the world. Originally it was built from any spirit, gin, brandy, you name it, absinthe even. But it was a name for just basically bitters, booze, and ice and sugar. And throughout the 1800s, as whiskey became popular, as whiskey became such a important American product, whiskey became the featured ingredient in an old fashioned. So an old fashioned, as we make it here, is 2 cherries. These are brandied cherries from France, shipped to us. They're soaked in brandy, and we even use the juice from the brandy in some of our cocktails because it's a little extra alcohol, a little extra sweetness. So you take 2 of your cherries. You got your container of sugar cubes. So you take 1 sugar cube. And you should have a little bottle of bitters. I don't know where my, oh, here it is. Yeah, this little bottle of bitters is Angostura bitters. This is what my bottle looks like. So this is one of the oldest bitters in the world. This comes from the Caribbean, actually. The most prominent flavor in these bitters is gentian root. Really heavy on the nose, very intense to actually drink. I wouldn't recommend actually drinking it unless you're very brave, or it's a very popular thing for bartenders to take a shot of Angostura. But for a casual drinker, I would not recommend it. But it's very aromatic. So that's what we call our aromatic bitters, Angostura. So you take about 5 dashes, 6 dashes, just enough to kind of soak up the sugar and and the cherries. Take something to muddle with. I know a lot of people don't have a full bar at home, but you can use a lot of things to muddle. I like to use the back of like a spoon or something just to kind of loosely break up everything. Just a splash of water in there also helps to kind of put those things together. And once that's all muddled, once you got the cherries broken down nicely and the sugar cube is dissolved, you're gonna take your Catches Dry whiskey. Your bottle looks a little smaller. Mine's a little bigger, so I'm sorry about that. But you're gonna take 2 ounces. If you have a measuring spoon or some manner of measurement, maybe some baking cups or something, but 2 ounces of our Catcher's Rye whiskey. And what I like to do is, without the ice, before the ice rather, just kind of stir it together, let the alcohol kind of soak up the sugar and the cherries. After a few seconds of that, you're going to want to introduce your ice. So, and I like to go kind of over the top of the glass with the ice because the ice melts kind of quickly, especially back in this incredibly hot distillery. But yeah, put just a little bit more ice than you think is going to fit in the glass. You're going to be surprised. Then you take your stir and work really slowly. Really, really slowly. You can use the back of a spoon or just like a regular tablespoon if you wish, if you don't have a stirrer at home. But just very, very slowly. Then you watch the ice melt and the spirit and the cocktail builds. And you want to stir until the outside of the glass is icy cold, right? That takes about 30 seconds or so. Once that process is done, your ice is melted nicely. You have one further step, and that is your orange. Hope everybody has an orange in their box. You can take the peel. If you have a peeler at home, a small knife will also do. And you kind of, what we do at least, is you twist the orange peel to get the oils. You want to get those oils out of the peel because the aromatics really kind of bring all of the flavors in the old fashioned together. And then what we do, our special touch, I would say here at 2 James, is just kind of swab the glass to get all those flavors and the oils and the aromatics on the rim of the glass, and then kind of mix it, stir it real quick. And there you have it. You have an old fashioned. There's a few variations of an old fashioned, but this is how we serve ours. So nice and sweet, very boozy, but again, our whiskey is a sweeter whiskey, so it ends up as a sweeter product. And again, much boozier, but one of the oldest cocktails in the world. Kind of goes between a Sazerac or an old fashioned, like which one came first. But originally, the base for this cocktail came from the 1830s. And then in the late 1800s, when whiskey and especially rye whiskey became popular, whiskey was used in place of brandy or gin or botanical spirits from other places. So, cheers. Pretty good. All right. And now we're going to move on to the debutante. So I have a shaker here. If some of you folks have these at home, it's totally okay if you guys don't. But this is our shaker tins. You can take 2 ounces of your Catches Rye whiskey. once again, we always pour 2 ounces in every cocktail, basically every cocktail at 2 James. So just a warning. And then you got 1 ounce of your sweet basil tea syrup. We use jiggers that are perfectly 1 ounce and perfectly 2 ounce on the other side. We got 1 ounce of that. This is our pineapple. Shake it up to make sure it's nice and fresh. You have 1/2 of an ounce of pineapple juice. One-half of an ounce of lime juice. That one was open a little bit. After that, you're going to introduce your ice. You want to fill your shaker, if you have a shaker at home, about halfway full with ice. You don't need to fill the whole thing. Some bartenders like to get really particular with it, like 6 cubes specifically, or whatever. But you just kind of get a handful, slightly more than the liquid in there, and that is adequate. So once your shaker is full, give it a good pounding. Whoops. And then you're going to shake for about 20 seconds. Kind of the rule of thumb is to shake until the outside of the tin becomes kind of frosted over. That takes about 20 to 30 seconds, or 20 to 30 shakes rather. Good arm workout, that's for sure. All right, so once that's ready, you're gonna prep your Collins glass, whatever you're serving your glass in, but we serve ours in a Collins. Take it again one more time. You gotta strain it over the ice. And last but certainly not least, I'm gonna top it off with ginger beer. Give me 1 second, I'm gonna grab one. You got your ginger beer. Top that off. And this is kind of a riff on a mule for us. So this is the debutante. And there you have it. A nice pineapple-y mule. Cheers again. So I've walked you through the process of making the cocktails. I've kind of shown you our tools as mixologists here at 2 James. And we made some delicious cocktails. Do you guys have any questions for me?
So folks, feel free, if you have questions, you can use the chat, or there's a raise hand feature. You can find that in the reactions button at the bottom of your toolbar or in the participants menu. And I see Rochelle has a question. She has her hand raised. So Rochelle, I'm going to call on you here.
Sure.
All right, Rochelle, go for it. Oh, Rochelle, that was me. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, you're Trevor. You're Trevor Cameron, right?
That's me. Yep.
Yeah. Hi. I'm Rochelle Brown, and I'm a student. And I'm a student alumni at Wayne State University, and I just graduated
Awesome.
with a bachelor of fine arts degree. So I got a question. I got a question for you, Trevor.
Sure.
How you make enormous elixirs? How you make your cocktails by using a variety of spirits to get the taste of the drink you created.
Sure.
So any cocktail, and like, before I started, it seemed like the process of making cocktails was like magic, but honestly, every cocktail in the world is 4 parts of basically your spirit, your citrus, your flavoring, and whatever else you want to put in it, an egg white or something for like a whiskey sour. So like, for instance, a whiskey sour is 2 ounces of whiskey, 3/4 lemon juice, 3/4 simple syrup, and an egg white. You have Sazerac, you've got 2 ounces of spirit, you've got a sugar cube, and you've got your bitters, which are Peychaud's bitters. So it's basically just knowing where those foundations are with your spirits, with flavoring agents such as bitters. And cocktails really didn't become a thing until the late 1800s when bitters were invented. So for instance, like the Sazerac, as I just mentioned, from New Orleans, originally made with brandy and a bitters called Peychaud's bitters, which is still called Peychaud's. But this man Peychaud's owned a cafe called the Sazerac Cafe in New Orleans in the 1870s, 1880s. And so he took, a variety of herbs and spices and created this wonderful aromatic bitters that was not quite like Angostura like we used in the old fashioned, but Angostura was just a very popular thing for people to, kind of spike their coffee with or spike their tea with. So when the French came to New Orleans, they brought with them brandy and cognac. So originally the cocktail was made with the Peychaud's bitters and these French liqueurs, but rather when Americans developed aging process for whiskeys and bourbons, those kind of overtook in popularity. So really, it didn't, the word cocktail even didn't exist until the 1890s. So this is a relatively, not new, but people think it's a lot older than it is. The process of bartending and cocktail, mixology, stuff like that, it's been around for a long, long time. So yeah, just knowing what we like to do is highlight what is local and what grows well in Michigan at different seasons. So when you look at our bar, look at our menu, some of these, like some of the flowers that come on the garnishes on the drinks were grown in our bartenders' backyards. So we try to take that level of care and dedication to Michigan's agriculture and what grows here and what thrives here in our products, from our whiskeys to even the presentation in our drinks.
All right, thank you for that. So this one isn't really too James specific, but a few of us are wondering if you have any insider information on what happened to those whiskey bottles they found at the train station.
I would love to know. I would love to know myself. And,
I think we all would.
I hope they come to market at some point. I don't know. I can't really speak to the quality of like what whiskey was like, bootleg whiskey was like at that point, because again, in Prohibition, like people were making bathtub gin, and just making alcohol in manners that they weren't really equipped to know how to filter or excrete the right kinds of alcohol. So people were dying because they were drinking alcohol, ethers, and acetyl alcohols that were very, very deadly. It was alcohol, but it wasn't the kind of alcohol that you can wake up the next day and just kind of have a headache. So yeah, I'm very curious about that myself, but we love to kind of pay respects to the fact that Detroit was, probably about 50% of the country's liquor and beer and whatever was bootlegged through Detroit. And of course, yes, Rochelle, alcohol is technically a poison, but you know what? Human beings, we love to push ourselves to the limit with things like alcohol, and everything in moderation. Obviously, I encourage everybody to be responsible about alcohol intake, but it's a wonderful world of spirits, and when you really get into localities and focusing on like regional specific spirits. It's just a flavor world that is really special to me. I came from the gourmet food industry first. I was a chef for Michael Mina, who's a globally known chef with several Michelin stars. And I came from the gourmet food industry and came into the bar industry and took that knowledge and approached, making my cocktails with my food background. And there's several other people here that have that similar background as well. So
Yeah, that's awesome. So we'll all keep our eye out, I guess, and see if any word comes about those whiskey bottles.
Yeah.
But lots of compliments on the drinks out there. I think folks will kind of do last call for questions. If anybody has anything else, again, you can put it in the chat or you can use the raise hand feature, which is under the reactions tab at the bottom of your Zoom bar there. What? Okay.
I can
Yeah. So
the other day. I met most of you. I made your cocktail kits. So
oh, very cool. Yeah. Oh, looks like Rochelle, we have one more.
yeah, I see that.
All right.
Ginger beer.
Rochelle.
I got another question. How you start your own distillery for factory, but like how you make your own type of spirits.
Well,
Yes, this taste of them.
it's a long process. I mean, anybody can make small batch spirits themselves, with their grains or fruits or basically any kind of sugar or carbohydrate. You can make an alcohol from it. So everywhere in the world basically has their own forms of high proof spirits. So like in France, grapes grow wonderfully. So cognac, brandies, and wines are super famous because they figured out that you introduce yeast to these sugars, these really sweet grapey sugars, and you get wonderful products like Cabernet from these regions from France and Champagne, and so like everywhere in the world basically like things grow, right? So America, corn grows really well. Rye grows really well here. So we figured out how to make high proof spirits with corn and rye and eventually developed bourbon. Another interesting fact about the process of putting bourbon in a barrel, it has to be charred. The barrel itself has to be burned. So it's charred on the inside, and there's levels of char that are required as per the United States government. The United States government has requirements for how to make bourbon. So bourbon has to be at least 2 years old, at least 51% corn. And again, the rest of that mash bill can be rye, can be wheat, but usually it's rye. And then barley and maybe a few other grains, but at least 51% corn aged in new charred American oak No. 4 barrels. They have to be new barrels. You can't use old barrels. You can't call it bourbon unless they meet all those requirements. A lot of people think that you can't make bourbon outside of Kentucky. You can't make Kentucky straight bourbon outside of Kentucky, but you can make straight bourbon anywhere in America. You can make it in Hawaii if you want. So that's why we have bourbons here in Detroit. And that's copyrighted by the United States government, owned by the United States government. It's America's only exclusive spirit. Just like the Mexican government owns the rights to making and producing tequila and mezcal. You can't make tequila and mezcal here in America. Even if you can grow agave and distill agave, you can't sell that as tequila or mezcal in America if it's sourced from America. So again, every region of the world has their own versions of alcohols and beers and wines and high proof spirits, and it's just basically like what is available, from farming and agriculturally, what's around. So
Yeah. So Vanessa is wondering, she had a question about your distribution, and do you guys how far and wide you distribute in Michigan, and I guess how far and wide in general would be wonderful to know.
Yeah. So our biggest buyer is Kroger and Meyer. So you can get us at Kroger and Meyer across the street. We are distributed to, we just finally got distribution rights to Florida. State-run liquor. States with state-run liquor stores are much harder to get into just because it's a little more rigid of a product line. But we are distributed to 15 states and 3 countries, Germany and the UK and here in America, obviously. And we're growing as much as we can, as much as we can keep up with production. Because we're still a small distillery. You know, you go to somebody like Jim Beam or Brown-Forman, Old Forester, and like their buildings are like 10 times the size of this, and you know they pump out 80 to 90% of what is on the shelf at Meyer. Jim Beam actually does. So we're a real small time rather, but we take the time to make a quality product and we don't rush it. So it takes longer, but it ends up with a better product. But unfortunately, it just is harder to distribute because we can't keep up with volume just yet. We're growing in popularity and recognition. So hopefully we'll be distributed to more states, but we're pretty well, for the size of a distillery that we are, we're very well spread around.
Awesome. Well, we love to see that. We love to see you guys growing. So, okay, I think that catches us up on questions here. With that, I guess we'll let everybody enjoy their cocktails. So Trevor, big thank you to you. Big thank you to James in general. I saw Charisse mentioned about considering a tasting in person. So I should say that too, James, you guys are open. So there's always that. And then Charisse, we're looking to have an in-person happy hour, hopefully the week of homecoming. So please stay tuned for that as well. So again, on behalf of Wayne State, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, Trevor. With that, good night and cheers.
Go Warriors. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.